Hello, welcome back to our channel, American Ultra Stock. Here we are, Braden and I again bringing to you guys part 2 of a requested video on hot takes about the U.S. youth national teams. The developmental stages of the players' careers that maybe one day, hopefully, represent our country at the big stage. There's a lot to talk about, and you see the guys behind Braden as well. They did their part in the Pan American Games, and a lot goes overlooked and we're going to discuss it. Braden, your first hot take on the U.S. youth national teams.
So my first hot take in this part two video is gonna be that this current golden generation that we have isn't really a golden generation at all, and that when we look down the line 30 years from now, we're gonna view this generation as very average. I think that the youth production in the US has taken a huge step over the last 5 to 10 years, and it's only gonna keep getting better. I know US Soccer Federation is really focusing on that in particular because let's be honest, in the past, our youth production has been pretty abysmal considering the size of our country. And given that youth soccer is actually the most played sport for kids in America, the fact that we haven't produced as good of players as we have until recently is kind of crazy to me. So it's a good thing that they're really focusing on that now. And even with our dual nationals who are playing abroad for the youth levels, I think that's a huge part as well. We have more players now than ever who are playing in academies, top tier academies in the best nations in the world: Brazil, Spain, France, England, Germany. The list goes on. So many youth prospects who are playing at high levels, even in America and abroad as well. So I think the current trajectory that we're on, a lot of countries like Belgium, for example, they have this one golden generation and they kind of fade away. I think Croatia is kind of like that. They've had some success as well, but not the same as the current generation they have. But I think for us, it's going to be different. I think we're on the rise as a nation, and it's only going to keep getting better from here.
I agree. Yeah, I completely agree. Especially those nations in the Balkans, it's really common for them to have a one generation like Bosnia a while back, Pjanic, Dzeko, and now they. But we have enough population to keep producing these players, keep improving our players, and talking about producing players and having players that can eventually represent us. I'm gonna throw a really wild take out there. I'm just gonna say we need more rednecks in the national team. I'm not going to say that this in a derogatory term. I'm just kidding, obviously. But what I mean by that is popularize Sunday League. Ultimately, this is my point. We need to popularize Sunday League in order for this sport to really kick off in the country. And the reason why I said rednecks is because we read the story about, it was just kidding, obviously, Clint Dempsey, how when he was a youth player, he didn't have the money necessarily to pay the fees to play clubs. So what he would do is play Sunday League with his friends, and he lived in a trailer park that had a huge Latino population. So his Mexican friends would play and invite him to play Sunday League, and he would play. And he said that was a really important aspect to improve his game and also have make him think faster. The stakes are a little bit higher. And everybody who has played Sunday League and has a club that they like in Sunday League with friends, they know the stakes are a little bit higher than just playing for a club. Really, sadly, it is true. It comes from within you, and I feel like we need to popularize that in order for kids to have an alternative route as well to where they can play. Granted, the level's not going to be ridiculously high, but you're playing against men. There's no cap on the age or minimum or maximum in most Sunday leagues. So I feel like if kids could go there, play it even as a hobby, as something to play on the side or when the club season's not on, it would definitely benefit them. Playing against older men, matured men, would definitely benefit a lot of our kids. So I'm just going to say that if we popularize that, it's another avenue for the sport to get bigger and better, and another avenue for kids who don't have the income to play for club, which is so expensive, the pay to play system. They have something else to look onto and hopefully have a different route, be it being from high school and then college soccer. Sunday league would definitely have a place in there, and it's instrumental in every other country. So I think that in the US it's a culture that we don't have yet and would definitely benefit from. Now, what's your second hot take on this, Braden?
So my second take kind of relates to my first one a little bit, that our youth production is just going to keep getting better and better, and it's going to be that the first ever $100 million, £100 million American is currently in our youth setup, because we've had players who have gone for big fees in the past, Pulisic obviously being the most notable one. I think at his cap, the one to Chelsea is around 65 million, but with the current market just keep getting inflated, and we see 100 million just thrown around like spare change these days on players like Anthony from Manchester United, who clearly have not delivered to the hype. And I'm not saying, obviously, I want our Americans to live up to the hype, but I do think eventually the day is coming sooner than we might think that one of our players does capitalize on that fee. And given that I said they're currently in the youth setup, maybe it'll be 10 years down the line, but I think we have a lot of very, very talented players in our youth national teams. I mentioned the first part of this video, our U16s. I said they're probably our best generation so far. And I think there's players from there, but it doesn't even have to be from there. It could be from the Olympic team, from the new U20s that the new cycle is going to be starting up pretty soon. Could be even lower down the line, the U15s, U14s. But I think somewhere out there, there's a player, and maybe there's multiple as well, that has currently played for our youth national teams that will eventually reach those heights of a $100 million player playing for the biggest clubs in the world: Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Manchester City.
Yeah, it would be nice to see. We definitely, a lot of people look at Sullivan and say that maybe he's that player, but I'll stay hopeful and think that hopefully you're right. It's already out there in our system. We're not waiting for him to be born yet. Now, I think we're at the level where we can bring everyone up, and if we have a special talent like that, he can definitely flourish. Now, my next point, talking about youth production, I'm going to say one that it's a little bit disappointing for me. We don't produce the easiest positions to make. In a lot of places in Italy, where the culture of catenaccio is so strong, center backs and defensive midfielders are the easiest positions for you to produce. Everybody who has played the game knows that it's a lot easier to defend than it is to attack. And that's why attackers have always historically been more hyped. They get more money, go for bigger fees. They change games. Goals change games. Now, stopping goals is obviously, I'm not going to do the soccer 101 here, but it is absolutely crucial. And all that it takes, really, in order to be a decent player, if you have the basic qualities of passing, covering your position, is the discipline. Have the discipline, the physical capabilities as well, because it is a very physical position. Physical capabilities, which I think that as a country we have in abundance, really, people with the physical capabilities to perform at an athletic high level. You just need that discipline and good technical ability and a lot of will and desire. Really, don't settle for the basics. And I feel like it's sad because we're producing these huge crop of players now that are very un-American. Really, I look at Paxton Harrison really and think that that's not a typical American player. The technique, Jack McGlynn, and then we're not producing the easiest positions to make. I think that our shortest position right now is center back, which is it's ridiculous. Usually you see center backs being if you play against Iran or a really small Asian nation, the center backs are going to be probably the ones that will be more up to par to a reasonable level than the midfielders or attackers, because it requires less technique. But at this moment, we're not producing the easiest one. And even our youth setup, I see a lot of hype on our forward-going players, but not so much on our center backs. Maybe that's just the nature of the position, but I would like to see some center backs getting to play in academies in Europe, and not just players who are midfielders or forwards. And that's a rare one, because 10 years ago, I would definitely not think that would be the case. But maybe it is a good sign. What's your next hot take on this, Braden?
Hopefully Josh Winder can be a pioneer in that situation, playing for Benfica's academy, obviously, as a center back, and hopefully he's just the start, because I do agree our center back pool is lacking a lot right now. I don't know what the case for that is. Players, obviously, when they're coming up as kids, they all want to play striker, they all want to play winger. No one wants to defend. But I think your point about smaller nations as well is valid, because I think when we saw against Trinidad and Tobago recently, their defenders did a very, very good job stopping our attackers, even though we all know they're not at the same level as our players are. It's just about the discipline, about the system, and how they work together as a unit. So I think the teamwork part as well is an important aspect, because we've had a lot of rotation in our center backs as well for the senior team and for youth teams as well. But mainly for the senior team, we don't have an established partnership. And I think that's part of the problem on why our defense is so bad. But getting into my last hot take for this video, and it's kind of an expanding on one of the ones I had in the first one that we did, which is that we need to emphasize on recruiting dual nationals at a lot earlier of an age. Because I said for my last hot take in the first video that we have a lot of important youth players who are playing for other countries right now, some of our most important ones. And I gave a bunch of examples. I mean, there's so many names out there. But I think we need to focus on recruiting them earlier, because right now the U.S. national team is a bit of a secondary option for a lot of players, but it's a more achievable one, because we're not at the level of some of these top nations that we share dual nationals with. And that's ultimately why I think we've gotten a lot of the dual nationals that we have so far. Like a lot of the ones with England, we won the battles because it's an easier spot to play in CONCACAF, despite the many unique things about CONCACAF that make games harder. It's ultimately a lot easier of opponents, and it's easier to break into the U.S. national team than it is to break into, say, in England, like Balogun and Yunus Musa proved. So I think we're, like I said, with our youth production, we're gonna eventually, hopefully, be at that level where we're on par with these nations, and it's just as hard to get into our senior team as it is to get into their senior teams. Which is why we need to prioritize these dual nationals earlier at a younger age, because if it gets too hard to break into our senior team, they're ultimately just going to choose other nations, and that's not beneficial for our future, because some of the best youth prospects that we have, and this has been shown with the senior team as well, are dual nationals. America is made on immigrants, and almost every person here has a secondary nationality, whether it's through their ancestry or they were born there. And I think if we can focus on scouting them and recruiting them to our youth national teams, our U15s, our U16s from an early age, if they're playing with us and they're really meeting other players from America who can identify with a similar situation as them, I think it'll help us in the long run get some of these dual nationals that, like I said earlier, are just going to keep being better and better.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, the country's made on immigrants. There's absolutely no problems with recruiting players from abroad. And I'm gonna touch my last hot take. Really it intertwines perfectly with this topic. I'm gonna say Cole Campbell is a must. After watching how he's performed with Dortmund, the position that he plays, he is a player that we in the past wouldn't produce. He is very similar. I would say, again, every player is different, but Gio Reyna, Malik Tillman, that sort of position, he can play on the wing as well. And he's such a technical player. And the fact that he's a dual national with Iceland, and we look to be on the brink of absolutely losing him. Granted, Iceland is one of the rare few cases where we are the bigger nation, if you want to say. So it is a bit of a different situation, but he is a must. I'll definitely start calling him up, even if for the Olympic roster, we're just playing friendlies there, really. And there are positions up for the taking going forward. So I would say that he's definitely a must. We can't lose. It would be a must also for me to see this. Can we recruit players when we are the toughest nation to break into? Just lure him in, try to add him to the program. I think that he's a must because he's also being produced at one of the best academies in the world, really, in Borussia. And I'll definitely think that players like that in the future should be a priority. It definitely goes hand in hand with what you said. We should start the recruiting process a lot earlier on. Serginho Dest gave an interview recently to PSV saying how crucial it was for him to get the confidence boost as well, that he was able to play at an international level from a very young age. I think he's the first case where we start recruiting these players at U15 age. So it would be nice to see. Now, anything else you want to add on to this video, Brandon?
Yeah, just expanding on that, I think, like you said, the fact that we're the bigger nation for players like Cole Campbell and another player who is also in our dual national tier list recently, Valentin Yotov, who's a Bulgarian youth international. Players like that who have a much easier path to the first team for their other nationality. We need to emphasize that we have a path for them, that they are important to us, because right now, obviously, they're not good enough for the first team, but I think in the future they will be. And we have, like I said, a lot of good dual nationals coming up more than ever that could really impact our first team for years to come. And I think the youth national team, the scouting range is very limited. We see a lot of just MLS players in the academies. They have worked on it a little bit. We have players like Zidane Yanez, who is in MLS, but he's also a Chilean international at the youth level. We have players like Landon Emanalo, who's playing for Chelsea's academy and is an English dual national that are finally starting to be called up. Manu Romero as well, of course, playing for Real Madrid's academy, youth international for Spain and Uruguay as well. But players like that, we need to keep focusing on those, because there are a lot of talented players in the MLS academies, but ultimately the bigger clubs have dual nationals that we have that are probably a little bit more talented, that if we could really identify them and have scouts who really put the emphasis on discovering which players have connections to the US and pick them up and recognize them at an earlier age, it could really help our future.
Yeah, I feel like the scouting program for the U.S. really should be the biggest one in terms of recruiting dual nationals in the world, really. So many people have ties to the U.S. Through an old ancestor that visited here a while back, or whatever reason. I feel like if we could double or triple that to not lose these players and start recruiting them from an earlier age, that would be ideal, really, for them to identify as Americans as well. But thank you very much, Braden. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave in the comments what you thought about the video. If you want a part 3 or what do you want the other hot takes video to be on, we'll definitely be on the lookout to bring you guys the content that you wish to see. Thank you very much. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.